Hey, Ben, this is Nick from Oregon.
Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, it's going all right. Hey, so I was going to ask you kind of a question about aftermath of the discourse involving Las Vegas. Do you think you have time for that question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so essentially, I think you've probably seen, since you're dialed into Twitter a lot,
Mhm.
is the conversation about gun control. Obviously, in the wake of this shooting, but
Right.
in the wake of all these shootings, you know, the conversation of gun control comes up, and I think this iteration of the discourse in this round per se is really interesting, because I think a lot of people have actually deferred to gun control is actually just a net negative for marginalized communities because of the fact that it just takes away from those first. And I thought that actually reminded me a lot of your position on, I think, Israel-Palestine, just kind of your international relations perspective of like being a realist. And I'm curious if you think that this kind of falls in that same dynamic. Obviously, it's a little different, but in that same dynamic of the realistic scenario of this is that gun control, in whatever way we try and approach it, is just not going to be ultimately beneficial or even really going to stop mass shootings or even just killings of marginalized people generally.
That's a tough question. Do I think
I'm always here for that,
or hang on, before I let you go, I need you to help me to make sure I heard you correctly. Are you saying what do I think about the perspective that gun control won't actually help change things, or what do I think about the fact that gun control is pretty much unrealistic to obtain?
To some extent, both of them. I mean, it seems like I don't personally accept that. I don't accept the idea that we can't do something about, and I would say that it's appropriate, at least in this instance, to talk about the availability and the lethality of guns in these scenarios. But I can't buy the idea that doing nothing about it is the option. And then if that is the only option we have, that we only have to just sit here and wait as each tragedy comes around and just say, well, we just can't do anything about that because the dynamic is just so screwed up that, you know, we couldn't even approach it if we wanted to.
Okay. And then the B side of that question is, even if we did accomplish it, would it actually stop mass shootings? And is
there a policy way to approach it where it actually benefits people, especially marginalized communities?
Oh, that's okay. Let me see if I can answer that off air. Thanks for the call, man. So I don't. Man, God, dog, you take me down a rabbit hole. That's a tough question, because there are a couple things at play in what you're asking. One, do I think gun control is possible in the United States? I honestly don't think it is until we weaken the NRA enough such that they become an afterthought and not the most powerful lobbying special interest group in the nation. Again, like we said, Monday night and Tuesday night, they have the ability to dictate the interpretation of an entire Constitution amendment. So until we weaken their grip and their stranglehold, I'm not sure that we can even get gun control. Doesn't mean we shouldn't fight for it. We should absolutely still fight for it. That's number one. Number two, to your second question, is whether or not I believe gun control can be implemented in a way that is beneficial to particularly marginalized groups. Underneath that question, and I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking, but underneath that question is the argument that marginalized groups should not be legislating away their ability to get access to weapons because they are marginalized groups. And then if we legislate away our ability to get weapons, then we, by definition, are limiting ourselves to nonviolent action. And in history, we've seen that there's very few occasions where nonviolent action alone accomplishes liberation. I don't know that I have a final answer on that for myself, believe it or not. Most things I've thought through enough to actually hold a position, a nuanced position that I can argue and debate. But I see merits in both sides. I see merits in the argument that, you know, marginalized groups should never legislate away their ability to get access to guns. I mean, it makes sense. But in the same time, I also believe that getting access to guns is not necessarily going to be our best way to get liberation, not in this season. And access to, you know what I think getting access to guns would do? Almost the old school Panther style. Sometimes when I see these police videos, I really do wish the damn Black Panther Party for self-defense was still there and marching and showing up on some of the scenes, right? A lot of times we see open carry protesters making a statement. But we need open carry protesters like the Black Panthers to be organized enough to actually be on the scene when police officers are beating the shit out of people. And they can't be a party for self-defense if they are just weaponless. I mean, what they're going to do is show up with their cameras, which is cool, but it usually does not stop that assault. And I know what I'm saying does kind of necessitate mass confrontations with armed people and police officers, but if they're in open carry states, what's the problem, right? And I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but that is the scenario that I see the need for marginalized people to have weapons, but that's not the usage that I hear being advocated for. A lot of times I hear people advocating for, don't let go of your weapons, don't sign on to gun control because you're not going to be able to fight the revolution without guns. And I'm like, the revolution is an abstract, I don't want to say far-fetched, but it's far removed from where we are. And so I don't know that I'm an advocate for not implementing gun control for the sake of some revolution that is far removed from us. I am an advocate now, as we talk about it, and you give me the opportunity to think it out through here on the air with you guys live, with you all live, rather. I am an advocate for something like the Black Panthers of old, Party for Self-Defense, people who showed up on the scene when police officers were assaulting, or at least had the reputation of doing that, or at least had the fear in the back of the minds of the institutions that people who are out here to defend citizens will show up with weapons and you don't know when. That is not far removed. In actuality, that's something that we need. I'm tired of seeing police videos where people are getting drugged and beat the shit out of, and all we have are cameras on the scene, you know, particularly in states where it's open carry. So it's a very complex question because we can't engage in that type of protest activism and direct challenge of authority, direct challenging of white supremacy if we don't have access to weapons. At the same time, damn, how many mass shootings do we have to encounter? So there has to be, and I think ultimately underlying the caller's question is how do we write policy such that it doesn't strip away our ability to have self-defense in the name of liberation and progress, and at the same time address the issues that allow people like Stephen Paddock to get access to all those weapons and wreak all that chaos and murder. A 2017 21st century iteration of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense would actually almost need to be multicultural. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, motherfucking cops are just shooting niggas down, man. I'm sorry. I know that's kind of raw, but you know, we need some white faces out there, man, because the cops are less trigger happy when it comes to white faces. I'm just keeping it real. I'd be terrified. Like if I showed up somewhere with a big ass gun in an open carry state and I pop up on a scene where cops are busting heads of people, you know, there's a good chance I'm going to end up with a couple of holes in me. Right. But if Johnny shows up with the same thing, you know, it's a good chance he might get accosted. He might get some, you know, harassed, but he stands less of a chance of getting a couple bullet holes put in him just on GP. I mean, look at how quickly they killed Tamir Rice in an open carry state, John Crawford in an open carry state. So, you know, I know this is not what the caller was talking about, but he made me think about this. It would have to be a multicultural coalition and multi-gendered, like, you know, the whole spectrum of people out there with weapons representing the liberation. It would have to be, because otherwise, man, my black ass and your black ass would get a couple of souvenirs. and so but then to everything else that you were saying, you know, actually I think that probably kind of summarizes it up. 857-600-0518. That's really, like, I really have a passion to see people use weapons for actual liberation purposes. And when I say liberation, I'm not talking about the proletariat revolution. I'm talking about getting police officers to understand that we have rights, that we have the right to not be assaulted. See, what I'm getting ready to say or what I've said, I'm getting ready to say sounds counterintuitive in that there is this idea that police officers are here to defend our rights. Right? I know that's not an idea you and I peddle in, but there is a pervasive idea that the police are actually here for us. And this is what's argued against us all the time. And when you see the police, how the hell do we even get here? But when you see the police, you see that they're not there to protect us, but they are here to absolutely have control. That's what they're here for. They're here for control and order based on whatever the prevailing system dictates as order. And there is a point in time where you have to let the system know that we are fully aware and cognizant of our position in society. And by that, I mean, at some point, we are going to have to hold the line, and it's crossing the tracks now, right? We see a lot of unfortunately, we're seeing white people, a lot of white young people getting killed, right? And now it's finally crossed tracks where we've been saying it for years, like this is happening all the time. And so now we're at the point where it has to be like a multicultural thing and I hate that terminology, but I don't really have another word right now on tip of my tongue, but it has to be a thing that has to be addressed from across the spectrum. It has to be, because the policing agencies are getting to a point, and probably have always been there, where they see themselves as them against the entire damn city. And y'all thought that it was just them against the black folks, but no, in actuality, it's them against the entire damn city. And this is what we're seeing in St. Louis, right? It's not only them against the city, it's them against, in St. Louis, it's the police officers against media. It's the police officers. I think Jordan Sheridan from the Young Turks was arrested along with 143 other people, many of whom were authorized observers, you know, people who were there to just observe, to record and document. And then, of course, you had journalists that were there, and you had activists that were there, and there was an entire dragnet. 143 people were arrested. That's because right now in the city of St. Louis, the police officers are carrying out the same mentality that I've been describing. It is them against the world. It's their city, right? 2 weeks ago, they were chanting, "Whose streets? Our streets." This is what the policing agencies were yelling in St. Louis. Whose streets? Our streets. They've lost their damn minds. No, officer, it is not your streets. These are not your streets. These are the streets of the people. Now, in your capacity as a citizen, yes, whose streets? Our streets. But in your capacity as a police officer, these are not your streets. You are a servant. Police officers are servants of the people. And we've allowed it, not we, white folks, yeah, have allowed it to go so far, right? To now, it's at a fever pitch where it's not just contained. I've been saying it for like years. I said it 2 years ago. If there is a police state, it started first in the black community, and we've been warning you all for a very long time that it's going to no longer just stay in the black community. It's going to go over to every community.